Southeast sports fans, Hanna Barton, Brenden Schaeffer. We've got the preview for your 2025 Missouri Tigers this video. Brenden, I bet you're pretty excited to talk about what's in store for this group this fall.
Yeah, I'm a Mizzou grad, and I'll try to keep it straight down the middle for this because there is a lot to evaluate about this Missouri team and a lot that's maybe unknown at this point in time relative to expectations. So it'll be fun to dive in and preview the Tigers here.
And obviously, lots of expectations coming off a great season, 10-win season for Drinkowitz and co. What does it kind of look like for them to build off of last season? And what are some of the expectations of maybe the Mizzou fan base for this season?
Yeah, I mean, look, 2 consecutive 10-win seasons. 2 years ago, they had the Cotton Bowl win. That was the best season under Drinkwitz, and they, fell a little bit short last year, going 9-3, a little short of what a playoff bid could have potentially looked like if you at least put yourself in the mix at 10-2. But still a productive season. They got a bowl win over Iowa, so continued to make sure they got the double-digit win total. But then a lot of change coming, right? Brady Cook now moving on to the NFL as part of the Jets. Luther Burden was the top receiving threat. He's now with the Bears. Right tackle Armand Membu was an early first-round pick, also landing with the Jets. And so you're replacing certainly some key pieces offensively. But the Tigers went out and reloaded in the portal in a pretty good way. Ahmad Hardy is a running back they're really excited about to potentially lead that run game. The defense added some pieces, especially on the back end, with safety Jalen Catalon being a key piece that has come in through the transfer portal, has a ton of experience. Was a good player with UNLV last year. But obviously, with any team, if you're going to talk about having expectations, you've got to talk about the quarterback position. And that's where there is some uncertainty, even as we record this video now in mid-August, wondering who the starting quarterback will be. The Tigers have not announced it as of yet. Bo Pribula is the big-time transfer that came in from Penn State, but even he has not been an experienced quarterback in college football. He's never started a game. Sam Horn has actually recently been drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers of Major League Baseball, but he is in the running to be the starting quarterback as well at Mizzou. And then they've got a pretty touted freshman coming in, Matt Zollers, who is at least part of the competition, but seemingly on the outside looking in at this point. So they've got to figure out the quarterback position before you can really think about what the expectations will be in Columbia, Missouri this year. But they do have a defense that I think they're pretty excited about, and some pieces through the portal that are at least making them believe they could have one of the more talented rosters of Eli Drinkwitz's tenure at Missouri.
I want to go back to that quarterback situation. Brenden, you talked about obviously the departure of Brady Cook, bringing in Bo Pribula. What, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with the Mizzou fan base, how are we going to see things look different without Brady Cook on this offense, you think?
Yeah, and I mean, what Brady Cook brought was he was a guy who, grew up a fan of the program and then got to lead it for multiple years and really acquitted himself nicely. It wasn't always perfect, but by the time it was said and done, I think fans really came to appreciate what he brought to the table. And there was an element of consistency, right? You knew what to expect when he was behind center. But at this point, there isn't that. You don't know exactly what the next guy is going to bring. If it's Bo Pribula, you feel pretty good about him continuing to have the quarterback run game be a significant part of what the offense could look like. Brady Cook did a lot with his legs, and I think Pribula might even be faster if they were to race in the 40-yard dash. But is there going to be that consistency throwing the football that Brady maybe struggled with early on in his tenure as the Missouri starter, but by the time it was all said and done, you kind of had that expectation with him. We've just never seen consistently Bo throwing the football or being asked to do that at the high major college football level. At Penn State, he was kind of a bit player that would come into games behind Drew Aller, but it would be to run the option or to do a specific play as part of a package. And if he's going to be the starter, he's going to need to do a lot more than that. Sam Horn's got a really strong arm and a little bit of mobility to him as well, but we just don't know what we would expect to see from him because he has not been thrust into that role at this level either. So a couple of unknowns. Perhaps that's why to this point in the summer, the quarterback battle continues to rage on. But I think that's probably the biggest question about Missouri, as well as what becomes of the left tackle position, because Caden Green is a preseason All-American at left guard, but he may not be playing left guard. In recent days at practice, he has been trotted out there to left tackle with the interior of the line, seeing some changes at Mizzou practice. And so the way that they end up trying to protect the blind side of whoever the quarterback is another topic of conversation. So it's not just Brady Cook. It's not just losing Luther Burden. There are several things going on offensively for Missouri that I think it just makes it difficult to project. It's why when we get into the win total and the schedule, there's a lot of unknown about the situation. You would probably talk in mid-Missouri if you asked Eli Drinkwitz, what the expectations are. Hey, we want to make a college football playoff. We want to do it all this year. But when you look at the outside perspective and the way that the win total is viewed around 6.5, 7.5, they'd certainly be exceeding expectations if they were to go on to another 10-win season like they're obviously hoping to do.
So some inconsistencies, or more so not sure what to expect on the offense. One thing that has been consistent on the defensive end is continuous improvement. And then that obviously resulted, in the recent extension for that defensive coordinator and Corey Batoon. What more do you think the defense needs to show this season?
I think the defense was pretty good last year. I mean, statistically, top 25 defense in a lot of different categories, but the consistency game to game and even maybe play to play, I think is something that you'd look to improve upon. It was very eerie at times that there'd just be a breakdown in the secondary and you're kind of seeing who's pointing fingers at whom to figure out what the heck caused it. And it just would be chunk plays, the type of plays that, you really can't afford to just give away on a regular basis in the SEC. The competition is too good to consistently do that and win. Mizzou got away with it with some really close wins last season. It seemed like all their home games came down to the final possession, but they ended up with a 9-3 record, and then winning the bowl game got them to 10. Defensively this year, I think you're starting with that secondary to say, can they avoid whatever the miscommunication, whatever happened from play to play, game to game? Can they avoid those types of chunk plays against their defense where it just truly seems like a defensive breakdown? And I think they went out and addressed the area of the secondary by adding a guy like Jalen Catalan, who is an experienced safety, to bring to the group. And they also brought in a couple of other transfers to that room. A transfer cornerback, Stephen Hall, is going to be part of the conversation. So if they can short things up in the secondary to avoid some of those lapses, I think they're going to be really strong defensively this year under Corey Batoon, recently extended via that contract, as you mentioned, because they've got a defensive front that's loaded in the edge rushing room. Guys like Zion Young are expected to really contribute, as they lost Johnny Walker, was a really good edge rusher from the team last year, but they've got some transfers from Georgia, guys like Damon Wilson that are expected to be involved. Darius Smith was another Georgia transfer that was thought to be involved last year, but then he ended up getting injured in camp, and so we never got to see him. So they're bringing guys like that back. And then the linebackers, Diego Pavia, with his situation, like suing the NCAA for that extra year of eligibility, actually benefited Missouri in a way, because they have a linebacker, Tristan Newson, who's a really talented player that went to JUCO and was able to do the same thing Pavia was, getting an extra year of eligibility. So I would say that they added via the portal, and they also brought some guys back that they maybe weren't even expecting to get back for that defense. You're hoping that it's going to be what can carry you, because I think if the defense is stout and Missouri, with a little bit of an uncertainty at quarterback, can use Ahmad Hardy, who's an exciting transfer running back that lit up the Sun Belt as a freshman last season, as sort of the focal point of the offense, take care of the football, let the defense be the element of the team that you can lean on. That could kind of introduce a new quarterback to the regime in a way that is a little bit more palatable, and not everything goes on his shoulders to say, oh, I have to fill the shoes of Brady Cook. If they can do those things, I think they can be successful this year. But certainly those questions on the offensive side are going to be intriguing to see answered as time goes along in the coming weeks.
All right, taking a deeper look at that schedule now. Win total sitting at about 7.5, Brenden. And the first thing that stands out to me as I'm looking at the schedule is there is a whole lot of home games for the Tigers this season.
Yeah, a lot of gold there at the beginning of the schedule. And I honestly don't know if that ends up being a benefit or a curse to Missouri in the long run, because what it inevitably means is you're going to have some difficult road venues that you have to travel into when the weather cools down and the excitement ramps up. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, but certainly the runway that you get at the beginning of the schedule is going to be the key to Missouri clearing this 7.5 win total at DraftKings Sportsbook, if it's able to do so. And by the way, that comes with currently plus money odds at plus 120, which is to say that the slight expectation is under, right? That's the favored option there. But of course, trying to not put too many of my homer takes in here, I do believe that Missouri can clear this 7.5 when you look at the way the schedule starts off. Central Arkansas, their FCS opponent, should be able to be a game that they handle. And then it does ramp up rather quickly with a big-time rivalry game in the Border War against Kansas. It's a rivalry game that we haven't seen since Missouri left the Big 12 about 15 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever that was. And now they're playing it at Faurot Field this year. Kansas returns their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, and so that's not a game that you can look over by any stretch of the imagination, and it'll be a hotly contested game, I'm sure. Missouri is looking to win that one, of course, before it gets into Louisiana. You've got UMass for homecoming. That's their other non-con game, and so you'd like to be able to go 4-0 in the non-conference. 2 of those home games that happen early, Hanna, are against South Carolina and Alabama. 2 teams that Missouri went on the road last year and lost against. The Alabama game wasn't remotely close. The South Carolina game ended up being a thrilling finish for the Gamecocks to be able to get that win. I would say that South Carolina, with the way that they're ranked in the preseason, very well could come into that game favored over Missouri. But if you're talking about anything beyond that 7.5, if you're even dreaming on college football playoff as Mizzou, that South Carolina game is really going to be a bellwether game, I think, for the Tigers and frankly, for the Gamecocks. They're having those same hopes and dreams coming into the season of being able to maybe get to a 10-2 record and be in the college football playoff. Very eager to see the way that that one shakes out. The Alabama game, yeah, you're going to come in as an underdog, but it's, again, one that if you're thinking with those lofty goals and expectations, there's no better time to be able to play Alabama, to do it at home, and try to find a way to start 6-0. 5-1, I think, would be a great, great record for Missouri to begin the season if they can get it. But that's when you start to talk about some of the road venues. How do you view going into Auburn, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, Hanna? Because it certainly could have been more difficult. Missouri considered to have one of the easier schedules. But I look at that and say, I don't think any of those road games are slam dunk wins for Missouri either.
No, I wouldn't say they're slam dunks. I would agree that out of the schedules that we've been taking a look at for some of these SEC teams, this one is definitely more favorable when it comes to Missouri. I think one thing that stands out to me is, their toughest opponents in terms of where we predict these teams to fall. Your Alabamas, your Texas A&Ms, your South Carolinas, they get to have those at home. And then you go on the road. None of their road wins are, as you mentioned, slam dunks, but going to Auburn, to Vanderbilt, I think Vanderbilt is going to be one that, honestly, as I'm looking at this, is going to be one of the tougher ones for Mizzou, because I feel like it's when you're looking kind of like that middle of the pack of the SEC. Obviously, you have like your top 2 or 3 teams, you have your bottom tier. Mizzou's kind of at the top of that middle, and Vanderbilt is trying to claw their way to that position. So I think Vanderbilt's going to be hungry anytime you go into a home game there. Obviously, not known as the toughest home environment, but don't tell Alabama that last season.
Right.
So I think they're all doable wins, but I think they're also ones depending on where they're sitting. I think it's good that they do have Texas A&M at home, because I think going on the road against Texas A&M, in my opinion, for Mizzou, that would be pretty much almost a guaranteed loss. But having them at home makes me think that it would be something that's pretty doable. Mississippi State at home, I mean, that's when you got to kind of get to let your foot off the gas a little bit, it looks, and you can kind of gear up a little bit for Oklahoma and Arkansas. It is unfortunate looking at the schedule that they do end with 2 games consecutively on the road.
Right.
So having to kind of stay strong at the end of the season. But that being said, they've got a lot of home games. So we'll
Yeah.
see what they're able to do with that home field advantage.
You just got to, first of all, you got to be able to beat Kansas if you're talking about clearing this win total. If you lose to Kansas, which again, like they're going to be this power conference team, it's a team that really has a good quarterback if he's healthy. And so, KU's got some expectations for what they can do in the Big 12 this year. But if you're talking about getting to an 8-4 record with an SEC schedule, even a more doable SEC schedule, the Kansas one's one you got to get. Even if you were then to lose South Carolina and Alabama, you're talking about starting 4-2. And you got to find 4 more. It's not going to be easy. I think any of the road games are winnable because of the nature of the way that the schedule breaks down. You don't have any of those top 10 opponents, right? Oklahoma, to me, is the toughest road game because there's a rivalry aspect to that one as well from the old Big 12. And the fact that they do have a new offense that they've installed. They have a pretty good quarterback as long as he stays eligible, which I think is probably going to happen. And he comes in with an offensive coordinator that is familiar with him from Washington State. So Oklahoma, to me, is the toughest road game. But you also wonder, like, with how tough their schedule is, do they come in with like a lesser record where they maybe let off the gas a little bit by that point in the season if things don't go their way? I can't count Missouri out of any game this year. That's the good news, because you mentioned it. Alabama, South Carolina, and A&M are their toughest opponents, and they get them all at home. But you've got a long way to go to be able to contend with Alabama and Texas A&M after the way you played those teams on the road last year. So I can't really count them as wins, and that's where the downside of the schedule comes. When you're talking about 7.5, there's a way to go below this for sure, because every single road game were the same opponents that Missouri played at home last year, and they won all those games by the skin of their teeth, like all of them. Vanderbilt was in like double overtime from a missed Vandy kick. Auburn, you had to have Brady Cook come back from literally the hospital to be able to win that game. Oklahoma, it comes down to a very late fumble by Jackson Arnold that Mizzou's able to scoop and score. In Arkansas, in the snow, they win it at the end. So they barely got to the 9 wins that they got. And now you have to go to all of those places. There's a realm in which Missouri does falter and goes maybe 6-6 with the schedule. Looking at it for me, though, I do see the upside if they can break a couple of those games their way. I look at the early home games 3 ways. Level 1 is Kansas. You got to clear it. And if you can, then I believe you might be competitive against South Carolina. You clear level 2 of South Carolina, maybe there's a chance you can play against Alabama. But if you lose at any of those early levels, well, the Alabama game starts to look like a pretty doubtful one. And then I start to question what they'll be able to do on the road. Myself personally, I think I'm leaning over the 7.5. It's just a question of how aggressive am I going to be when it comes to this Missouri team, given the questions we still have at quarterback, left tackle, and the like.
With that being said, what is your final lock-in answer for win total for the Missouri Tigers?
My homer answer is that they're going to make the college football playoff this year and win 10 games, and Eli Drinkwitz is going to really assert himself as one of the premier coaches in the SEC. I think there's absolutely a path to that happening, but I could also see things slipping here or there. You know, South Carolina, to me, is one of the biggest games Missouri has had as a program in a long, long time. Because if you win that game, there's a real chance of being undefeated going into that Alabama game. Maybe there's a college game day scenario there if that happens. There's excitement in the air at that point. I'm going to go 9-3 when it comes to this official prediction. Don't tell anybody else I said that, because everywhere else I'm saying college football playoff all the way. But right here, as we're talking to a lot of SEC fans, I think it's another really, really strong season for Missouri. I think it's going to be difficult to run the rail the way they're going to have to do to make the CFP, but that doesn't mean I'm not putting a little bit of money on that, because the odds are around plus 750, plus 800. I think Missouri being overlooked a little bit right now, if they can get the quarterback situation figured out, I think the defense is talented enough for them to make a run this year. But officially, I'm going to go 9-3 as my prediction for the season.
All right, we'll see what your fellow Mizzou fans have to say about that once this gets out there. But that's we're gonna have to see what the rest of the season looks like as we head into it for those Missouri Tigers. But for now, that's your 2025 preview.